The morning sunlight spilled into Victor Len's apartment, but for once, it did not feel like the usual empty glow of success or wealth. It felt warm, human, alive, because after weeks of struggle, distance, and quiet longing, he had finally made the choice he had avoided for so long. A choice that cost him everything he had built, yet promised him everything he truly wanted. And as he looked around the bare space, stripped of unnecessary luxury, he thought of Hannah Cole, the woman who had entered his life by accident, who had walked through the wrong door on that first morning and unknowingly changed everything. And Victor knew that. Nothing, no board meetings, no money. No prestige mattered more than proving to her that love was possible, real, and safe. With him, and he remembered every detail of her presence, her hands trembling as she apologized that day. The way she looked at him honestly without flattery. The way she carried strength and kindness together like it was effortless. And for the first time, he understood that power was nothing without connection. That success was hollow without someone who made you want to be better. And so he picked up his phone and sent the message he had written countless times in his mind. The words simple yet heavy with truth. Meet me at the place we first talked honestly. I have no titles, no deals, no excuses. Just me. Please. Meanwhile, Hannah, sitting in her modest new apartment, opened the message and froze, her heart racing with hope and fear. Because she had spent weeks convincing herself that leaving him was strength, that walking away from a man like Victor Len was protection, and yet she could not deny the pull. The connection that had never faded, and despite fear, despite the pain of possible disappointment, she chose to respond, "I'll come," and the simple words carried a weight neither could measure. For when she walked toward the rooftop where the city stretched beneath them, the wind brushing softly around her, she saw Victor standing there, not in a suit, not commanding the world, but just a man, vulnerable, sincere, open, and waiting. And for a long moment, neither spoke, the silence heavy with everything that had happened, with every mistake, every misunderstanding, every moment of longing. And then Victor finally broke a stillness, his voice quiet yet powerful, telling her that he had been wrong to push her away, that losing her, even temporarily, had been unbearable, that every achievement, every victory, every plan felt meaningless without her presence. And Hannah, feeling tears prick her eyes, admitted that she had feared she could never be enough for him, that the world around them demanded sacrifices she was not sure she was willing to make. But Victor reached for her hand gently, hesitating only for a heartbeat before holding it firmly. And in that touch, Hannah felt every fear, every longing, every past disappointment melt slightly, because it carried not power, but safety, honesty, and a promise of partnership. And Victor, seeing her eyes glisten with unspoken emotions, told her plainly that he did not need her to stay out of duty, obligation, or love of his world, only out of desire to share life together honestly, fully, and freely. And Hannah finally allowed herself to breathe, because she understood that choice and freedom were stronger than fear, and that the man she had once feared for his coldness had grown into someone capable of tenderness, patience, and courage. And as the wind moved around them, carrying the distant sounds of the city, Victor leaned slightly closer, careful, respectful, but his eyes never leaving hers. And Hannah, her heart pounding, realized that she wanted this perfection, not safety, not wealth, but him, fully, unguarded. And so she stepped closer, a small but deliberate movement, closing the distance between them. And when their hands intertwined, it was no longer just touched, was understanding, connection, forgiveness, and love. And Victor smiled, a rare, open smile that reached his eyes and carried all the emotions he had held back for years, while Hannah returned the smile, her own tears breaking free, not of sadness, but of relief, joy, and belonging. And they spoke softly then, words not rehearsed, words that carried their hearts, speaking of mistakes, misunderstandings, fears, and dreams. Realizing that the accident that had brought them together, the wrong door, the trembling hands, the unexpected fear, was now the beginning of everything that mattered, everything worth living for. And when Victor finally took a small step forward, bringing his forehead gently against hers, Hannah closed her eyes, letting herself feel the full truth, that love was no longer fragile or hidden, that courage had been rewarded, that the world outside their connection could wait, because in this moment, nothing mattered but the bond they had fought to protect. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light around them, Victor whispered softly, almost to himself, "I will never let you go again." And Hannah, smiling through tears, whispered back, "I'm not going anywhere." And together, they stood on that rooftop, hand in hand, hearts beating in unison, to people who had survived fear, mistakes, and distance, and now, finally, allowed themselves to be completely unreservedly and beautifully in love, and the city around them could continue its rush. The world could demand power and success, but up there, on that rooftop, Victor Lane and Hannah Cole discovered a truth far stronger than ambition, stronger than fear, stronger than any obstacle, that sometimes one small mistake could change a life forever, not into chaos, but into a love that no force in the world could ever break. A love that had been waiting quietly, patiently, for the courage to finally bloom. And as the wind carried their laughter in soft whispers across the skyline, it was clear to both of them that nothing else mattered except each other, that the journey of mistakes, misunderstandings, and growth had led them to this perfect, imperfect moment where love had finally won, fully, honestly, and forever. After the rooftop meeting, nothing returned to normal, because once truth is spoken, silence becomes impossible, and Victor Lane felt it the moment Hannah Cole walked away from him that day without giving an answer. Her steps steady, but her heart clearly torn, and the uncertainty hurt more than rejection, because it meant she was still fighting inside. While Victor returned to his office, knowing that whatever happened next would not be decided by contracts or power, but by courage, something he had avoided his whole life. And the very next morning, the consequences began, as rumors spread faster than truth ever could. Whispers turning into sharp questions from the board, employees noticing Hannah packing the last of her things, and Victor's ex-fiancée watching everything with calm interest, because she understood the game better than anyone. And during an emergency board meeting, she used the moment perfectly, suggesting that Victor's recent emotional distractions were affecting leadership, hinting that personal involvement with staff could damage the company's image. And for the first time, Victor did not defend himself with cold logic, because deep inside he knew they were not completely wrong. And yet he also knew that losing Hannah would cost him more than any company ever could, while Hannah, spending her final days quietly training her replacement, felt invisible again, as if the world had decided her role was finished. And though she tried to convince herself that leaving was strength, her nights were sleepless, filled with memories of small moments shared silence, soft words, looks that meant more than promises, and, when Victor requested one final private meeting, she almost refused, afraid that hope would weaken her resolve. But fate did not give her that choice. Because the meeting was interrupted by a public confrontation when Victor's ex-fiancée arrived unannounced, making her presence known, speaking openly about their past, about future plans, about how power required sacrifice. And Hannah realized in that moment that she was standing between two worlds, one built on control and expectations, and one fragile but honest. And instead of waiting to be pushed aside, Hannah made her own decision, excusing herself calmly and leaving the building without drama, without tears, choosing dignity over uncertainty. And when Victor watched her walk out, something inside him finally broke, because he understood then that love demanded action, not hesitation. And in a move that shocked everyone, Victor canceled the partnership deal, walked into the boardroom, and openly admitted his mistakes, stating clearly that his leadership had been built on fear, not respect, and that he was stepping down temporarily to protect the company and take responsibility for his choices. And the room fell silent, because no one had ever seen Victor Lane surrender control willingly. And as news spread through the company and media, whispers began. Hannah heard about it from a former co-worker and felt her heart ache with confusion and guilt, believing she had caused his fall. While Victor, stripped of title and protection, finally he felt honest with himself for the first time, realizing that love was not about possession or safety, but about choosing someone even when it cost everything. And as both stood separately in their own quiet spaces that night, Victor alone in his empty office, Hannah alone in her small apartment, they each understood the same truth from opposite sides, that the mistake which brought them together had now reached its highest price. And whether that price would lead to loss or something deeper depended on what came next. After Victor Lane stepped down, and the company buzzed with rumors of his sudden decision, the quiet that followed in the Lane Corporation felt heavier than any meeting room or boardroom confrontation, because while the employees speculated and whispered, Victor felt hollow, stripped not only of his title but of the presence of the one person who had brought color and life into his otherwise gray, controlled world. And Hannah Cole, meanwhile, tried to settle into her new position at another firm, one that was far smaller, quieter, and safer. Yet every morning, she found herself thinking of Victor the way he had watched her work without judgment, the rare moments when his expression softened, the times when he had trusted her completely. And she couldn't shake the memory of the rooftop, the letter, and the final private conversation they had shared, where honesty had laid bare everything neither of them could yet act on. And in the weeks that followed, both felt the invisible tug of loss, a feeling neither could name fully, but both understood instinctively, because Victor wandered through his apartment at night, staring out of the windows at the city lights, the emptiness around him echoing louder than any applause or business victory, while Hannah tried to focus on new colleagues, new tasks, and new routines. Yet every interaction felt muted, because her mind kept drifting back to the office, to the files, to the quiet strength she had felt in Victor's presence. And as the weeks passed, Victor began to act, not through control or power, but through small acts of care, checking in on her, sending messages to make sure she was safe, offering support quietly and without expectation. Yet Hannah, fearing her own heart, ignored the messages at first, telling herself that leaving was right, that being close again would destroy the walls she had built. And yet the universe seemed unwilling to let them escape each other, because when a crisis arose with Victor's former company, a sudden emergency requiring his expertise, experience, and insight, he found himself working with Hannah indirectly, through emails, documents, and coordinated virtual calls, and the tension was electric, because despite distance and circumstance, their connection could not be broken. And Victor noticed every small detail: how Hannah responded calmly under pressure, how she never gave excuses, how she carried professionalism with a quiet kindness. And he realized that the very qualities that had drawn him to her before were now a lifeline, something no money, no position, no past could replace. And Hannah, noticing Victor's presence through messages and indirect collaboration, felt her defenses crack, though she refused to admit it, because admitting it would mean vulnerability. And vulnerability to someone as powerful as Victor Lane felt dangerous, yet necessary, because the heart is not governed by logic or fear. And both began to communicate cautiously, indirectly, sending small signals through work. Soft words hidden in formal notes, jokes disguised as emails, smiles sent through video calls. And in this delicate dance, the longing they had both buried grew stronger, deeper, undeniable, until one evening, when the crisis reached a critical point, Victor requested a meeting with Hannah, faced in a neutral space outside the office, a small cafe, quiet enough for conversation. And when she arrived, she was tense, expecting anger, confrontation, or rejection. Yet Victor only looked at her with raw honesty, stripped of title, wealth, or pretense, and he spoke softly, telling her how much he regretted pushing her away, how powerless he had felt without her, and how realizing her absence had been the most painful lesson of his life. And Hannah, listening, felt her chest tighten, tears threatening, because hearing truth from someone like Victor Lin, the man she had feared, respected, and secretly loved, was more powerful than she could have imagined. And she struggled to respond, trying to protect herself, trying to convince herself that love was dangerous, that distance was safer. Yet she could not deny the longing that had never faded, the sense of being understood, valued, and seen in a way no one else ever had. And Victor, seeing her hesitation, did not push, did not demand, only waited, because he knew that trust and courage must be earned. And slowly, carefully, Hannah let herself speak, admitting that she had loved him quietly, painfully, yet she had been afraid of what his world demanded, afraid of being crushed under expectation, afraid of losing herself. And when she said it aloud, Victor's eyes softened, a rare smile breaking across his face. The first smile she had seen that seemed fully real, fully human. And in that moment, the walls between them cracked. Yet still, they faced challenges, because the world outside, their small connection, was unforgiving media speculation, corporate politics, lingering ex-fiancé influence, and the lingering fear of repeating past mistakes. But they both understood one truth clearly, that their love, born from mistakes, missteps, and fear, was now undeniable. And Victor made a promise, not of power, not of wealth, not of protection, but of commitment, honesty, and presence, telling her that he would prove love not through control, but through support, through patience, and through action. And Hannah, seeing this vulnerability and sincerity, realized that love was not just about safety, but about courage. And together, they stepped into a fragile, untested future, hearts exposed, yet stronger, knowing that even if challenges remained, they would face them side by side, and that the mistake that had brought them together would now be the foundation for something deeper, more real. And finally, because sometimes, losing someone temporarily is the only way to understand the true value of love. And both Victor Lane and Hannah Cole had learned this lesson in the hardest way imaginable, ready now to choose each other fully, despite fear, doubt, or outside pressure. The distance Victor Lane created did not bring him peace the way he expected, because every time he avoided Hannah Cole, his thoughts returned to her even stronger, filling the quiet moments of his day and the long nights when the city lights outside his office window blurred into meaningless. And Hannah, though hurt by his sudden coldness, refused to show weakness, choosing instead to focus on her work with even more care, arriving earlier than before, speaking less, and hiding her emotions behind a calm face that fooled everyone, except Victor, who noticed the change immediately. Noticing how her smile no longer reached her eyes and how her voice stayed careful, controlled, as if she were protecting herself from something fragile inside, and this silent pain weighed on him more than anger ever could. Yet neither of them spoke about it, because words had become dangerous, and the office around them grew heavier with unspoken rumors, co-workers whispering that Hannah had lost favor, others guessing she had made a serious mistake, and a few quietly blaming her for Victor's recent harsh decisions. While Hannah endured it all, alone, refusing help, telling herself that surviving meant staying invisible. But fate did not allow invisibility for long. Because one afternoon, the company announced an important partnership meeting that would decide the future of the firm. And the name attached to it made Victor's chest tighten. His former fiancée, a powerful businesswoman with a sharp smile and a history of control, was returning as a representative of the partner company, and when Hannah read the name on the schedule, she felt something cold settle in her stomach, even though she told herself she had no right to feel anything at all. And when the woman arrived, confident and elegant, her presence filled the office instantly, her eyes sharp enough to notice everything, including the quiet tension between Victor and Hannah. And during the meeting, the ex-fiancé spoke with familiarity, referencing old memories, shared jokes, and private history, each word cutting deeper than the last. And Hannah sat silently at the side, her heart aching as she watched Victor struggle to remain professional while being pulled back into a past he never fully escaped. And afterward, when the woman asked Victor to join her for a private dinner to discuss the partnership, Hannah heard the invitation and felt something inside her finally crack. Not in anger, but in acceptance, believing that whatever she imagined between herself and Victor had never truly existed. And that night, she went home and cried quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt final, deciding that she needed to protect herself before she lost more than her pride. While Victor, sitting across from his past at dinner, realized with painful clarity that the life he once planned felt empty. That success, without honesty, felt hollow. And that every smile from his ex felt forced compared to the quiet presence of Hannah. Yet when he returned to the office the next day, he found her resignation letter waiting on his desk. Short and respectful, thanking him for the opportunity, explaining she had found another position, and apologizing for any inconvenience. And Victor froze, the paper trembling slightly in his hand as panic rose in a way he had never felt before, because for the first time in his life, money, power, and control meant nothing compared to the fear of losing one person who had changed his silence into something meaningful. And as he stood there, holding the letter, Victor Lane understood, too late, that love does not wait for permission, and that the mistake that brought Hannah into his office was now forcing him to choose between the life he built and the truth he could no longer. Victor Lane stood still for a long time after reading Hannah Cole's resignation letter. The office, around him feeling suddenly unfamiliar, as if the walls that once represented success were now closing in on him. And for the first time since he became CEO, he felt truly powerless, because there was no deal he could sign, no money he could spend, no command he could give that would undo what that single piece of paper represented. And his mind replayed every moment he had pushed Hannah away, every cold word, every silence he used as a shield, realizing too late that what he called protection had felt like rejection to her. And downstairs, Hannah sat at her desk pretending everything was normal, answering calls, organizing files, smiling politely, while inside she felt hollow, because writing that letter had taken all the strength she had left. And she kept telling herself that leaving was the right thing, that she was saving herself from embarrassment, from pain, from dreaming of something that could never exist. Yet her hands trembled each time Victor's name appeared on her screen. And when the elevator doors opened, and she saw him walking toward her desk with a look she had never seen before in Spartan, urgent, human, her breath caught, but she stood anyway, professional to the end, asking if he needed anything. And Victor wanted to say everything at once, wanted to tell her that the past frightened him, that power had taught him the wrong lessons, that caring felt like standing unarmed in a war zone. But instead he asked why she was leaving, and Hannah answered calmly that it was time for her to move on, that she appreciated the opportunity, and that some worlds were not meant to mix. And those words hurt Victor more than anger would have, because they sounded final. And as days passed and Hannah began clearing her desk quietly, the office atmosphere shifted, coworkers whispering again, sensing something important was ending, while Victor grew restless, distracted, losing focus during meetings, shogging the board with silence, where confidence once lived. And when his ex-fiancée returned, pressing him about the partnership and hinting at rekindling their past for business advantage, Victor finally saw the truth, clearly that his past was built on control, not love, and that Hannah's presence had shown him another way to exist, one where honesty mattered more than image, and this realization terrified him, because choosing Hannah meant risking everything he built, and choosing safety meant losing the one person who saw him without fear. And the night before Hannah's final day, Victor walked through the empty office long after midnight, stopping by her desk, touching the chair she sat in, the files she organized, realizing how deeply she had become part of his world without ever asking for space in it. And meanwhile, Hannah packed her small apartment, folding clothes slowly, remembering the first day she entered the building, the wrong door, the mistake that changed her life, wondering if she would ever forgive herself for falling in love with a man she could never truly have. And when her final morning arrived, she dressed carefully, not to impress, but to protect herself, telling herself that dignity was the only thing she could carry forward. And as she walked into the office for the last time, every step felt heavier, until she reached her desk and found an envelope waiting there. Her name written in Victor's handwriting, and inside was not a contract, not an apology, but a simple note asking her to meet him on the rooftop at noon. And Hannah's heart raced, fear and hope colliding, because she knew that meeting could either heal her or break her completely. And when noon came and she stepped onto the rooftop where the city stretched endlessly around them, Victor stood waiting. No suit jacket, no confident posture, just a man standing alone against the wind. And for a moment, neither spoke. The silence, filled with everything they never said, and when Victor finally spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of authority, telling her that he had made mistakes, that pushing her away was the worst decision he had ever made, that he did not know how to love without control, but he wanted to learn. And Hannah listened, tears forming, despite her effort to remain strong. Because hearing truth from a man like Victor Lane felt more powerful than any promise. Yet she reminded him gently that words were easy when spoken once, that her world had always taught her to survive disappointment, not expect miracles. And Victor did not argue, did not promise perfection, only honesty, saying he could not ask her to stay, but he could not pretend she meant nothing, and that if she left, he would respect it. But he needed her to know that the feeling she believed was one-sided was never imagined. And as the wind carried his words across the rooftop, Hannah realized that love was no longer the question. The question was whether courage could exist in a world built on fear. And as she stood there, looking at the city below, she understood that whatever choice she made next would change both their lives forever, because the mistake that once brought her into his office had now placed her at the center of a decision neither power nor money could control.ignore. After that morning, everything inside the Lane Corporation felt the same to everyone except Victor Lane and Hannah Cole, because while the building stayed quiet and professional, something unseen had begun to move beneath the calm surface, something neither of them wanted to admit existed, yet both felt every second of the day. And it started with Victor doing something no one expected. Nothing at all. He did not call Hannah into his office. He did not send an email. He did not ask HR to prepare termination papers. And this silence was worse for Hannah than being fired, because every minute she sat at her desk felt like standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to be pushed. Her fingers shook when she typed, her eyes kept moving toward the glass walls of Victor's office. And every time his shadow passed behind them, her heart jumped. But Victor never looked at her directly. Instead, he watched her when she wasn't looking, noticing how she focused deeply on her work, how she helped other employees without being asked, how she apologized even when things were not her fault. And this confused him, because people around him usually acted carefully, like they were walking on glass. But Hannah moved with quiet honesty, and that honesty disturbed the controlled world Victor had built around himself. Days passed, and the company faced pressure from a major client. Meetings became tense, voices rose, and Victor's patience grew thin. Yet Hannah remained calm, arranging schedules, bringing files before he asked, reminding him softly of important calls, and once, during a heated meeting, she gently placed a document beside him that solved a problem everyone else had missed. Victor paused, read it, and for the first time in years, the room saw and looked surprised. The meeting ended quickly, and as people left, Victor spoke without lifting his eyes and said, "Good work." 2 simple words, but they hit Hannah harder than any shout, because praise from Victor Lane was rarer than silence. And that night, Hannah went home confused, telling herself it meant nothing, that he was just being professional. Yet Victor sat alone in his office long after dark, staring at the city lights, replaying the moment she had entered the wrong door, realizing something uncomfortable, that she did not fear him the way others did. She respected him, but she did not try to please him. And this made him feel seen, which was something money had never given him. The next day, he asked her to stay late to help prepare for an investor dinner. The office emptied, the lights dimmed, and they worked side by side in quiet focus. Occasionally, their hands brushed when reaching for papers. Neither spoke, but both felt it. the air growing thick with unspoken emotion. And when Hannah finally gathered her things to leave, Victor surprised himself by asking, "Why did you apply for this job?" And Hannah answered honestly, saying she needed stability, that her mother was sick, that she believed hard work mattered more than luck. And Victor listened, truly listened, something he had not done with anyone in years. And when she left that night, he realized he was waiting for the sound of her footsteps to disappear before returning to his empty office. The days that followed brought rumors, quiet looks, whispered words. Because people noticed Victor calling Hannah more often, noticed how his anger softened when she spoke, and noticed how Hannah remained professional, never crossing a line, even when her heart began to feel heavy. Because she knew the truth, he was a man of power, and she was someone who could lose everything with one wrong step, and so she built walls around her feelings. While Victor, without knowing it, began tearing his own down, one silent moment at a time. And by the end of that week, both stood on opposite sides of a line. Neither had planned to approach, unaware that soon circumstances beyond their control would push them closer than either was ready for. And the mistake that brought them together was only the beginning of a far greater risk neither could yet see coming. As the following weeks passed, the distance between Victor Lane and Hannah Cole slowly changed shape, not shrinking but bending, into something heavier and harder to ignore, because Victor found himself depending on her presence more than he ever depended on any assistant before, asking her opinions during private moments, trusting her judgment without questioning it. And this trust confused him, because trust had always been his weakness, something he learned to avoid after years of betrayal disguised as loyalty. Yet Hannah never pushed, never asked personal questions, never tried to step beyond her role, and that quiet respect made Victor feel safe in a way power never had, while Hannah, on her side, struggled every morning to remind herself that Victor was still her boss, that whatever warmth she felt in his tone or softness in his eyes was dangerous, because she had seen how quickly this world could crush people like her, and so she buried her feelings beneath routine, arriving early, leaving on time, keeping her words professional. But emotions do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They grow heavier. And one afternoon, when Victor collapsed into his chair after a brutal board meeting that left him silent and distant, Hannah hesitated before offering him coffee. Noticing how tired he looked, how the sharp lines of control on his face seemed weaker, and when she placed the cup beside him, he surprised her by saying quietly that everyone wanted something from him, except her. And those words stayed with Hannah long after she returned to her desk, because they carried loneliness, not power. And from that moment, she began to see Victor not as a cold CEO, but as a man locked inside expectations he never chose, a man who built walls so high he forgot what freedom felt like. While Victor began to notice small details about Hannah, the way she hummed softly when focused, the way she bit her lip when nervous, the way she always thanked the cleaning staff by demand, these details made his world feel human again. Yet the pressure outside their quiet moments increased. Investors demanded faster growth. Rivals spread rumors, and Victor's ex-fiancée's name surfaced during negotiations, bringing old memories he had buried deep, memories of manipulation dressed as love, and this made him pull away emotionally without explanation, confusing Hannah, who sensed the shift but did not understand. It's 'cause. And when Victor became colder again, sharper with his words, Hannah blamed herself, believing she had crossed an invisible line, and this misunderstanding grew into silence between them. Days where they worked together but spoke less, where glances were avoided, where the tension felt heavier than before. Until one evening, during a sudden emergency project that kept them alone in the office late at night, the building empty and quiet, the silence finally broke when Hannah, exhausted and overwhelmed, made a small error in a report. Something minor, something easily fixed. But Victor reacted sharply, his voice cold and distant, and Hannah froze, the old fear returning. And in that moment, months of pressure spilled over as she apologized repeatedly, her voice shaking, and Victor realized too late that he had become the man everyone feared, again, and the look in her eyes was not respect, but hurt. And that look cut deeper than any business loss ever could, because it reminded him of the bathroom mistake, of her fear, and how he had promised himself never to be that man with her again. And so he stopped, took a breath, and did something unexpected. He apologized, quietly, honestly, without excuses, and that apology changed something between them. Because Victor Lane never apologized, not to anyone, and Hannah saw in that moment that his anger was not cruelty, but fear. Fear of losing control, fear of caring, fear of repeating past mistakes, and from that night onward, the bond between them became more fragile but more real, like glass that could shatter but reflected truth. And yet, outside their growing connection, danger continued to build, because rumors inside the company grew louder. Whispers of favoritism, of inappropriate closeness, and Hannah began to feel eyes following her, judgment forming without proof. While Victor's board questioned his focus, warning him that emotional weakness could destroy everything he built. And this pressure pushed Victor into a painful decision too: protect Hannah by distancing himself publicly, even if it meant hurting her privately. And so he returned to cold professionalism, limiting contact, keeping meetings short, assigning others tasks he once trusted only to her, and Hannah felt the change immediately, her heart sinking as she realized she was losing something she never admitted she had, yet neither spoke about it, both trapped by fear, pride, and position. Unaware that the mistake that first brought them together was now pulling them toward a moment where silence itself would become the greatest risk of all. Victor Lane was not a man people felt comfortable around. He was the kind of man who made a room fall silent the moment he walked in. At 34, Victor was already a millionaire CEO. He owned one of the fastest growing companies in the city. His name was printed in business magazines. His face appeared on billboards. But behind the success, Victor was known for only one thing: he was cold. Employees whispered stories about him. Some said he fired people without blinking. Others said he never smiled, never laughed, never cared. Victor did not deny any of it. That morning, he stood inside the top floor of his glass building, staring at the city below. His office was large, clean, and silent, just like his life. A meeting waited for him in 10 minutes. Another deal, another victory, another day with no meaning beyond numbers. He turned away from the window and checked his watch. Late. He hated lateness. At the same time, 6 floors below, Hannah Cole was struggling to breathe. It was her first full day as the executive secretary to Victor Lane. Her hands were shaking. Hannah was not rich. She was not powerful. She had worked hard just to reach this position. This job meant everything to her. It paid her mother's medical bills. It kept her small apartment warm. It gave her hope. But everyone had warned her, "Don't upset Mr. Lane. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make mistakes." And Hannah was terrified of making one. Her morning had already gone wrong. Emails, calls, schedules, everything felt too fast. She ran down the hallway with a folder pressed against her chest, her heart beating hard. She needed the restroom. Now, she turned a corner quickly and pushed open the nearest door without reading the sign. And that was the mistake. The door closed softly behind her. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Too quiet. Hannah froze. This was not the restroom. This was an office. A private office. She slowly lifted her eyes, and her breath stopped. Victor Lane stood only a few feet away. His jacket was off. His sleeves were rolled up. He was loosening his tie, his sharp eyes lifting to meet hers at the exact same moment. Time stopped. The air felt heavy. Hannah's face turned pale. Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I thought." Victor stared at her. No one entered his office without permission. Ever? His jaw tightened. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Hannah panicked. She stepped back, almost dropping the folder in her hands. "I'm Hannah Cole, your secretary. I opened the wrong door. I didn't mean to, please. I'll leave right now." She turned to run. One word. Sharp. Final. Her feet refused to move. Victor had planned to shout, to demand an explanation, to fire her on the spot, but he didn't. Because something was strange. She was not acting. Her fear was real. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were wide, honest, and filled with pure panic. Not ambition, not pride, not greed. No one ever looked at him like that. Slowly, Victor walked closer. Hannah's heart felt like it would explode. "I didn't mean to disrespect you," she said quickly. "This job matters to me. I swear I'm careful. I just made a stupid mistake." A mistake. That word echoed in Victor's mind. He studied her face. Simple clothes, no heavy makeup, no fake smile. She was real, and that unsettled him. Before Victor could speak again, a knock hit the door. "So, the board meeting is ready." The moment broke. Victor stepped back. "Leave," he said. Hannah didn't wait. She rushed out, her legs weak, her eyes burning with tears. She knew it was over. She knew she would be fired. Inside the office, Victor stood alone. Again, but something was different. He could not focus. Her face stayed in his mind. Her voice, her fear. For the first time in years, Victor Lane felt something he could not explain, and he did not like it. Downstairs, Hannah sat at her desk, staring at her screen without seeing it. Every sound made her jump. Every passing second felt like a countdown to disaster. She whispered to herself, "You ruined everything." Minutes passed. Then an hour. No call, no message, no firing, no firing. Victor Lane watched her from behind his glass walls. Unseen, he should have ended it. Instead, he waited. Because one small mistake had just opened a door. neither of them was ready to walk through, and once opened it would never fully close again.